Dun 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 dun. This is a TPIMSR Live short report.
Here, Peloton, remember why you started.
The sprints.
We've got this together. We are always a team.
WMMJ HD3 Bethesda, WKYS HD3 Washington, WPRS HD3 Waldorf, and worldwide at WOLDCnews.com. Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. 6 o'clock straight up in Washington, D.C. Our guest is Mystery Man Mark from Anaheim discussing the drone attack on Iraq last week. Number to call to speak to Mark. And we're going to open the phone lines, and especially those who've been holding. We'll let you ask a question for Mark. 800-450-7876. So, Mark, I'm going to let you finish your thought. Then we got some folks who want to talk to you from all over across the country.
All right. So before the first break, the name was Percy Cox. Second break, Kermit Roosevelt. Third break, I talked to you now about Special Activities Center, and I gave you all a little quote. I know Mr. Nelson has a bad memory, so I'm not even going to ask him what the memory is. The quote is, when diplomacy won't work and the Marines are too noisy, the White House turns to the men of Central Intelligence Agency. And they've been doing that since the Eisenhower years, because Mr. Nelson, while folks want to sit here and talk about how Eisenhower was more peaceful and he tried to warn us about the military-industrial complex, the fact is, Mr. Nelson, it was Eisenhower who discovered a way to overthrow countries without having to send a large number of U.S. personnel in uniform to do it. So nobody gave Special Activities Division, which is now called Special Activities Center, more leeway than Dwight D. Eisenhower did. So, we had lads in places like Hungary and, of course, I already mentioned Iran, Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador. I can go on and on and on, Mr. Nelson. Many of those guys did become hardcore members of the John Birch Society. Later on, during the Reagan years, they were back in power again, doing their things until Hassan Fuss got shot down, little redneck boy from Georgia, former Marine, that had a little black book with names like Theodore Shackley and other guys. Well, Mr. Nelson, Shackley's dead, but a lot of his Iran-Contra war criminals are now back in the Trump administration, and they're back to doing the same thing because they're mentally ill. After all, insane. You keep doing the same things. It's like going into Afghanistan. Mr. Nelson, come on, you can attest to this. In 2001, Mr. Nelson, you had a radio station in Florida. Is that not correct?
Correct.
In 2001, did I not tell you on your show down in Florida, if the United States goes into Afghanistan, they will lose, and you will see heroin on the streets of the United States that would make Vietnam look like romper room?
Mm-hmm.
Are we winning the war in Afghanistan? Now we have U.S. troops guarding the poppy fields in Afghanistan, and you not only have heroin, but you got fentanyl on the streets. And Mr. Nelson, we have been in Afghanistan so long now, sons and daughters of people who were sent to Afghanistan under George W. Bush, the sons and daughters of those personnel are now serving in Afghanistan. That's how long we've been in Afghanistan in a losing war, because we are led by people who are insane. The British learned more than once they can't win in Afghanistan. You can't win. The Soviet Union learned you can't win in Afghanistan. And now the U.S. goes over there like, we can win. You cannot win in Afghanistan. You will never win in Afghanistan. They're insane, Mr. Nelson. Sociopathic, insane individuals. Now, the last time I came on the show, Mr. Nelson, it was 2 shows before my last, I said, I've never been a fan of Donald J. Trump, and 4 years ago, I never thought I would come on your radio show and say this. But had it not been for Donald J. Trump, we would already be in the world war that I told you was coming. And I said that Trump made a big mistake by getting rid of Bolton. All these John Birch Society boys that put him in the White House, he started acting like he was running things. Then he started getting rid of a lot of these John Birch Society boys who were responsible for putting them there. And getting rid of Bolton was the same, in my opinion, as Kennedy getting rid of Allen Dulles who was in charge of CIA. So I saw Trump either being forced to get into some of these wars that these John Birch Society boys want him to get into, or he would have to be taken out politically, or no matter how they're going to do it, take him down with an impeachment or whatever. And it's sad because I'm not at the White House. I'm not privy to what they're saying. These are my opinions. But I think Trump was misled into making a decision with that drone strike that's now going to force his hand. That's going to increase the chances, Mr. Nelson, of something being escalated. Meanwhile, you got these so-called generals and experts on televisions basically telling the whole world what to make a target in retaliation for the drone strike. So if you do have people out there who never thought about it before, why are people going on radio and TV now telling the whole world, well, Donald Trump has his name on hotels around the world. Those are perfect soft targets. Are they like planting the seeds in the head of somebody? Because see, Mr. Nelson, I know quite a few Iranians. They're pragmatic people. And while everybody's being told how Iran is going to retaliate, if Iran was going to retaliate, you think they're going to retaliate right now while everybody expects them to retaliate? But more importantly, if Iran decides not to retaliate, you might have other factions out there who are on the fringe, who may not feel that Iran is going far enough to honor the memory of this general, and they're in other countries. And now they're being told over and over again by U.S. media and so-called military experts, hey, why don't you go attack a soft target? Because Trump's already said what, Mr. Nelson? What would happen if any Americans become the victims of a retaliation by Iran?
You're going to strike back.
And how many times would he strike back minimum?
52.
5-2. That comes back from the Iran hostage situation back in 1979, right? 444-day event. So what I'm saying to you is we have now publicly with tweets and media put the perfect environment out there, Mr. Nelson, for perhaps a private contracting firm appearing to be Muslims in some country that attacks a soft target that kills Americans, or maybe even a legitimate, some fringe crazy Wahhabist group, or some fringe crazy supporters of Iran, or some fringe crazy supporters of this general who now have had the seed planted in their head to go out and do some action. We are in a very vulnerable situation right now that any little incident could be magnified and won't become a little incident because of the what I consider senseless and irresponsible discussions on most of the media I've heard by so-called experts in the prior military wearing the uniform. So I hope that helps the listeners, and I hope you see where the only reason why I came on this show today, because that's all I'm hearing is this John Birch Society crap. And as Mr. Nelson told you during the introduction, that's what got me on radio in the first place, because back in the 90s, it was Ollie North and G. Gordon Liddy and everybody else who's monopolizing the radio airways spewing their crap. So hopefully there has to be somebody out there that's going to give you the reason to go do your own damn research and realize that's not the only perception or opinion of what's going on. But I think, I don't like to be a defeatist, Mr. Nelson, but except for this radio station, there ain't too many stations that are going to bring somebody like myself on, and it's not going to be carried by many stations. So I know a lot of people are listening today because I put the word out that I'm on. And I'm thank you all for not disconnecting us. Because Mr. Nelson and I got disconnected this morning, and we were just talking on the telephone. So I guess somebody else wants to hear what I have to say, but it's sad. It's not a funny thing. We're closer to World War III right now than ever before, and I would imagine whoever has the what they call the doomsday clock in regards to how close we are to a nuclear war, they just ramped it up, Mr. Nelson, because now Iraq has said they've been confirming with their Iranian cohorts, and the Iranians said they're no longer going to honor any semblance now of the nuclear trade agreement. So
getting close.
We're getting close.
All right. Let's take some calls.
Hi.
800-450-7876. Kiki's been holding for a while. Kiki, thank you for being patient. Kiki's in Iowa. Kiki, you're on the market.
Hey, I'm sorry. Thank you for taking my call. My question to you is, what do you think, because you're talking about a lot of misinformation and disinformation that's being spewed right now. And what do
Hang on a second. Kiki, are you on a speakerphone? Because you sound way.
Can you hear me now?
Can you get closer to the phone? Can you get closer to
Can
that
you hear
phone?
me now? Okay, great.
Not much better,
I'm
but
sorry
go
about
ahead. Make it quick then.
Okay. I was saying that the information that you were talking about, the disinformation, I want to ask you about this thing that's going on, these news that they're saying about Trump now, that he's actually rescuing thousands of children from like sixth grade and everything, and that he's really trying to bring it down and be like the agent of chaos in this whole system. Is this true? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Is like saying Trump is rescuing thousands of children? Is that what you're saying?
Like he's ordering like FBI agents and everything to go in and do that.
But where are they doing these rescues?
Like there was one in Michigan. There was some that was rescued like a few months ago in Atlanta. They're finding like a lot of children that are being trafficked around the country.
You still there, Mark? I think we lost it. Oh, both of them got disconnected. Okay. So, we lost both of them at the same time. Interesting. Anyway, we're coming up on a break real soon. We'll get to you. We'll get back Mark, and we'll get back Kiki as well. Kiki's in Iowa. We got calls from Texas, Long Beach, D.C. You want to join us? 800-450-7876. One question I want to ask Mark. Maybe somebody will ask me about this bounty that they placed on 45's head. Comedian George Lopez, he got in trouble because he said he would do it for half the rate, whatever the bounty was or is. Supposedly, we'll find out from Mark if that is true. 800-450-7876. Take a short break. Come back with Mark, and hopefully Kiki will call us back right here on 1450 WOL, where information is power.
WOL Radio.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Mark from Anaheim, and also we were speaking to Kiki out of Iowa, and both of them got disconnected. Is Mark back yet?
No, I'm not here.
Okay, thank you. Kiki got
we went for a little while before they snapped at us, so we did well today. That was a record.
Right, that was kind of a record. Kiki got a taste of it though, because people think this doesn't happen for real.
Kiki asked the question, is it misinformation or is Trump rescuing sex trafficking victim children in major cities within the United States? And what I was going to say to Kiki was the fact, well, isn't ICE, INS, Border Patrol, do they not come under the auspices of the Trump administration, Mr. Nelson?
I sure do.
Do we not have a minimum of 1,800 children right now who were taken into custody coming across the border who are unaccounted for by those agencies?
Yeah.
Do we not have 800 women in this country who were taken into custody coming across the border by those agencies that are unaccounted for?
Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with what Kiki's referring to, but I doubt seriously that Donald Trump and his FBI, which he's trying to decimate, and his administration is rescuing sex trafficking children when children who have been taken into custody by federal agencies that have to have paperwork cannot find a minimum of 2,300 people right now in this country, and nobody's talking about it.
All right. 800.
By the way, folks, that's the same thing that was going on in Germany. Nobody talked about it.
Connecting the dots. Johnny's joining us from Long Beach, California. He's on line 5. Johnny, your question for Mark from Anaheim.
Hey, Mark and Carl, thanks for taking my call.
How you doing, bro?
Pompeo.
See, I already know Johnny. I knew Johnny would call and mess with me, but I'm sorry, bro. Go ahead.
Pompeo. He's a JB, right?
That's an understatement. Yes, he is from the Midwest.
Okay, because it's interesting because today, man, it came out.
He's a tool. He's a specific tool of one of the wealthiest John Birch Society families on the planet, which is the Mercer family. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, he's the one that pushed Trump to do this. And you know what, Mark? Because I said, if Trump would have did this on his own, he's been back. He's been boasting about that. Trump he's been quiet about this, man. He's not talking about this at all. Like, I took him out. He got played. I think he got played, man. Just like George Bush got played.
Yeah. Yeah, because they had to lie about the uranium case to get George W. Bush to go in and do things. And Colin Powell, to this day, regrets that he was so stupid that he allowed himself to be used, thinking that these guys were telling him the truth. And for you folks, just to get an idea of what I'm talking about, Colin Powell was so upset that even when Barack Hussein Obama ran for president, Colin Powell endorsed Barack Hussein Obama both times, even though he's still a Republican. He was so angry how he allowed himself to be used. Now, when I say allowed, unwittingly allowed himself to be used for the propaganda they were putting out there to justify trying to go into those countries. And I'm not going to say that I'm responsible. There's no way I can take credit for this, but I will say I still remember how Barack Hussein Obama came out and declared his red line in the sand regarding Syria and chemical weapons. And I came on Mr. Nelson's show, because normally Mr. Nelson brings me on a Thursday. I came on Mr. Nelson's show on Thursday, and I said, look, I know the White House is listening to the show, and if Barack Hussein Obama goes into Syria, they're going to impeach him because he didn't go to Congress. And the next day, Barack Hussein Obama came out and changed his mind about going into Syria. Now, of course, they use that as a sign of weakness of Obama. So here you got Trump, fast forward Trump. Trump put into the same position. He can't appear to look like Obama. Now Trump has set himself up to be impeached by Congress, which means and Johnny, so what that means is Trump, who wants to, his ego, he can't handle this. He will now go along with the program, and then McConnell then won't honor that impeachment request that Nancy Pelosi's got hanging over his head.
Exactly. But Mark, I wanted to ask you one more thing I have. This gentleman that got killed, you said he was a peacemaker, right? Because why'd they take him out now if he wasn't causing any problems? That's the thing.
Well, from what I understand, secretly he was brokering a deal that was going to bring Iran and Saudi Arabia closer to being allies, kind of similar to, Gaddafi. Gaddafi was bringing all the rival African countries together as one, and Gaddafi had to go. So.
Okay, man. I just wanted to. And one more thing, man, about the Bidens, man. Can you tell the audience what is it the Bidens that if this stuff that came to fruition, whatever the son did, what kind of problem would it cause? Or I'm just curious about the Bidens, man, because they're going to use him like they used the emails about Hillary Clinton.
Okay, so.
All right, take care.
Yes, sir. The Bidens. Basically, you have four people right now running for president, right, Mr. Nelson? You got Elizabeth Warren, you got Joe Biden, you got Bernie Sanders, and you got Donald Trump, right?
Mayor Pete, you're not counting.
Come on, let's be realistic, okay?
Okay.
What do those four people all have in common?
They're white.
All white people. They didn't get where they are today without having to bend the law in a few places here and there to be able to stay in office that long. And they probably stayed at Trump's hotels from time to time, which have surveillance cameras everywhere. You folks skip it. Donald Trump was a gambling casino owner, okay? He's so corrupt that he can't even get a license for his casino for gambling in Vegas. So I don't play the crappy game of, well, he was never called a racist till he ran for president. Well, that's a lie, because in 1972 he had to put a 2-page ad in the New York Times apologizing for not letting colored folks rent from his apartments. That was long before he ran for president. He can't get a license for gambling in his casino in Vegas. What more do you folks need to know? That's who you put in the White House. Just call a spade a spade. So you got him there now. He told you he could do whatever he wants. He can do whatever he wants because he's got dirt on everybody. He told you during the first debate in the Republican debates, you see these 17 other guys on stage, I've given them all money. That way, no matter who gets elected, if I need a favor, I can go to any of them. What more you folks need to know? And so when it comes to Biden, Biden is the one person that Wall Street will endorse if they don't back Trump. Wall Street has already said they're going to back Trump. The bankers like Trump because Trump lets them get away with whatever they want. Biden is the number 2 person they will pick as far as somebody from the Democratic Party, because Biden is not going to interfere with the banksters. So I hope that answers Johnny's question.
Well, let's go a little further on this because.
There we go. Let's go a little further.
No, Obama wants Elizabeth Warren. He's been quietly touting and pushing
Who told you
Elizabeth
that?
Warren. That's what
You're
I
not
read.
serious, are you? That's not who Obama wants.
Who does he want?
You better try again. You mentioned his name a little while ago.
Help me out.
Buttigieg.
Obama wants.
Sorry. You didn't know that. You didn't know that, huh?
No. I thought he was.
Well, there you go. That
Fine.
teaches you to think. Don't think. Thinking will get you into trouble. Obama does not want Warren. When Obama became president, did we not just experience the worst financial disaster during our lifetime? And depending on who you talk to, it may have been as bad, if not worse, than 1929.
Right.
Now, Ronald Reagan, okay, John Birch Society, they came in and destroyed the savings and loan. For all you folks who love that movie, It's a Wonderful World, that movie's about the savings and loan, thanks to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They came in and destroyed savings and loan. It was the savings and loan that allowed the average person in this country, especially World War II veterans, to finally buy a home, especially black folks. That GI Bill. Now, of course, a lot of neighborhoods didn't matter because the white folks didn't give them the loan to get the home. But in places where blacks were able to buy, they were able to use their GI loan thanks to savings and loan. Savings and loans are gone now. And in spite of all that, Mr. Nelson, the Reagan administration prosecuted something like over 700 people involved in banking during his 2 terms in office. How many people did Obama prosecute involved with the Wall Street crash 2007-2008?
Too big to fail.
I think they prosecuted 1 person. This is Obama. Well, we can't look backwards. We have to look forward. That's who Obama is. Come on, folks. Obama's in bed with the banksters. That's why, Mr. Nelson, I came on your show in 2011, and this is what I specifically stated. By the year 2020, if not sooner, you're going to have a dictator in the White House, and Obama will get reelected. Why? Because Obama is doing exactly what Wall Street wants. I came on your show in 2011 and said that.
I do remember.
And Obama got reelected. In fact, a lot of white boys out here in California, they owe me lunch because you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, dude, listen, I don't say I like it. I don't say I agree with it. I'm just telling you the way things are. Obama is doing everything that the banksters want, and he will get reelected because Obama and his wife, they still had student loans they hadn't paid from college, Mr. Nelson. Do you know they didn't pay off their student loans until like his 6th year in office? And now, how is he sitting when it comes financially?
He's one of the richest black men in the world.
Because, and where did they just buy a house, Mr. Nelson?
Where up the Cape.
Oh, the Cape, huh? You mean like Martha's Vineyard?
Martha's Vineyard, yeah.
So all you colored folks in Chicago, how's that working out for you? So let me just tell you all this, because this was in April 26, 2012. So I'm sorry, I said 2011. But the elections still weren't until November. And this is what I specifically... I'm sorry, I'll hold that thought till we come back from the break.
Yeah. All right, 800-450-7876. Tariq here calling from Texas. Here next. Also, we get to James as well. 800-450-7876.
Washington, D.C.'s 1450.
1450 WOL Radio.
And thanks for rolling with us, folks. I'm Mark from Anaheim. The number to call to reach is 800-450-7876. Mark, I'm let you finish your thought, and we'll talk to you.
Finish my thought. You just want to push my buttons, get my blood pressure up. Why the hell you mentioning Obama to me? Now, you know, Mr. Nelson, before Obama even won the election, I told you I'll vote for change my butt. Obama is the best Republican the Democratic Party has provided us since Bill Clinton, okay? And now, I'm sorry, say again, now, he just got a house in Martha's Vineyard, Mr. Nelson?
Correct.
So, I wonder how all those colored folks back in Chicago feel about that. You know, Chicago, the place where he sent his boy to become the mayor who destroyed Chicago, especially Chicago's education system, so that Betsy DeVos and all their private charter schools can come in now and really rape the city. Thank you, Chicago, for helping me get where I am. Come on. I mean, seriously. But, back in April of 2012, Mr. Nabum, specifically April 26th, I came on this show with you and I said, any serious researcher or historian can see how today the United States mirrors the Weimar Republic prior to the rise of Hitler. And on April 12th, 1922, Hitler stated, and if we ask who was responsible for our misfortune, then we must inquire who profited by our collapse. And the answer to that question is the banks and stock exchanges who are more flourishing than ever before. All right? I further went on to tell you all that the corrupt banks and Wall Street continue to see record profits. Obama is doing exactly what the wealthy want him to do, and he will see a second term because this country is headed for a civil war and a world war, and by the year 2016, if not by 2016, by 2020, the country will be led by a dictator. Now, what is Maxine Waters and everybody calling Obama these days, Mr. Nelson?
That's what they're calling him.
Yeah. And the banks, when people talk about why should Trump worry, come on, folks. The economy is better than it ever was, right, Mr. Nelson? Isn't that what they say?
That's what they tell us.
And when they tell you the economy is good, what are the two things they always point out? They talk about the unemployment and they talk about Wall Street. Neither one of those are indicators of the economy. They're only minor symptoms of the economy. Because, see, when they talk about Wall Street, Mr. Nelson, I don't know how many of your listeners are invested in Wall Street, but I know I'm not. Secondly, yeah, people are unemployed. When they say unemployment figures are low, that doesn't mean they're not underemployed. Now the average person is working 2 to 3 part-time jobs, no medical, no dental, no pension. And a lot of people have decided to give up and not go back and look for a job at all. Or they're living at home with their families, so they're not being counted. The economy is not good, Mr. Nelson. We've had the longest bull market in U.S. history. And the thing about it, folks, if you don't know this, every time there's a bull market, what comes next, Mr. Nelson?
The bear.
And the bigger the bull market, the bigger and worse the bear market. So, folks, if you think 2007 and 2008 was bad, you haven't seen anything yet because they keep propping up, and not just here in the U.S., but around the world. They keep propping it up, hoping that it's going to still survive, but the foundation is rotten, and it's all going to come crumbling down. And when it comes crumbling down, it's going to come crumbling down ugly. That's why I tell folks this is not the time to disrespect your families. This is not the time to be going out and buying a house. This is not the time to be separating. This is the time for people to be getting together and formulating a plan on what they're going to do, because there will be some gnashing of the teeth. And they're trying to make it through this next election to hope at least Trump gets back in the White House, but it may not survive that because all it takes is for one little kindling to have a war. And I'll tell you, Mr. Nelson, like I said, this is the first year the Olympics, we're going to have surfing in the Olympics, and I've been telling people for 4 years. I give it a 60-40 that we're going to even have the Olympics. But now with what happened with the drone attack, unless things change here soon, unless people will stop ramping it up in the media trying to foment the flames, I give it a 50-50 now that we're going to have the Olympics. Because you talk about a soft target, that would be the soft target, Mr. Nelson.
All right. 800-450.
Don't be mentioning Obama to me again.
Okay. Tariq in Texas. Tariq, thank you for being patient. Your question for Mark.
Oh, good afternoon, Mr. Nelson. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon, sir.
I don't know if you've hit this already because I got disconnected while I was holding. It was kind of a strange disconnection because everything just went soft, but I was still connected and it just dropped all of a sudden. Never had that before the few times I have called. The thing I want to get some insight, I don't know if you touched on this earlier today, was I noticed after I heard about that attack in Iran, I went back and I checked the stock market, and I just happened to notice that on the 2nd and the 3rd of this month, Raytheon, Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, all of their stocks just happened to shoot up that same day.
Yeah, when you got cut off, I told Mr. Nelson, see, brother, no, that was after the attack. But what I told Mr. Nelson was 48 hours before the attack, there was a major increase in activity in many defense contracting stocks.
Yeah. And it was almost simultaneous. I looked at the I guess the scope, the ticker, it was almost simultaneous. It was almost all of them started picking up money. The same stocks just happened to go up at the same time. Nobody else really had an influx like that but them. I'm not a money guy, but
have you ever seen the movie the movie with Rodney Dangerfield, Back to School?
Oh, it's been so long ago, man. No, I haven't. If I have, I don't remember it.
Okay, so what happened was Rodney Dangerfield was just a Joe Blow businessman, but he did okay. Mm-hmm. And now his son is of that age, and he wants his son to go to college because he wants his son to take over the business, but he wants his son to go to college, come back, educated, take over business. And he's like, I don't want to go to college. And he goes, I need you to go to school. He goes, well, Dad, you're a successful businessman. You didn't go to college. So Rodney Dangerfield went back to college because that was the only way to get his son to go. So they're in class, and they got this, snobby. In fact, I think it was the same school that Trump went to for a while, the Wharton School of Business. So this guy, he's a snobby Ivy League professor teaching the business class, and he's telling them what they have to do to be successful businessmen. So Rodney Dangerfield, he's sitting in the back of the room, and Rodney Dangerfield is not exactly couth, and he's like, wow, I don't know what y'all talking about, but this is what you got to do. First, you got to grease the politicians. Then you got to get them to rezone the district so you don't have to get raped in taxes. And while he's talking to them, the professor in the front of the room is not all mad, but all the children in the classroom are turning around and taking notes from what Rodney Dangerfield is saying. Mm. Now, why am I telling you? 2 years ago, I got invited to the Balboa Yacht Club down in Newport Beach because I was in my college sailing club and also the surf club. So I got an invitation. They go, hey, we're going to be out here in California. Would you like to come to this event? I'm like, hell yeah. I go, they don't even have any black folks working at that place, much less members. Mm. So I went to that event, and needless to say, I was a fly in a bowl of milk like I always am, or as I always am. And while I was at that event, there were several people on this yacht from Newport Beach area who had graduated from the College of Charleston. And guess what they were all involved in? They were all like entry-level employees now working in Wall Street.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, while we were out in Newport Bay Harbor, in the Newport Bay, there was a fleet of J.P. Morgan sailboats. They all had J.P. Morgan sails on them, and they were sailing by. And I said, oh, so you guys are on Wall Street, huh? Like Wall Street is the biggest legal Ponzi scheme in the United States.
Exactly.
And I said, unless you're a blue chip stockholder, you're not making money on Wall Street. What you have to do is hope that some sucker will come in and buy up stock that you're invested in. And if nobody else comes in after you and buy up those stocks, you lose all your money. And I said, I'm not in the Ponzi scheme. And then I said, the same thing's happening in law enforcement. I go, I said, stock exchanges in New York. They send this chief of police commissioner, Bratton, out here to LAPD. He does the same Ponzi scheme. If you want to reduce crime, what you do is you come in and reclassify the crime. Then you bring in LAPD detectives. They have to sign up the crime reports. That way supervisors don't properly put the title on the crime reports. And when it comes to statistics, it looks like crime is going down when actually all they did was juggle the numbers around and change the names and stuff. And then if that doesn't work, you start changing the classification of crimes where people now are not getting arrested for stuff they used to get arrested for, or you reduce it from a felony to a misdemeanor. And now people are being released from jail early or prison early, and it looks like crime is going down when actually crime is going up and is worse than ever before.
Exactly.
And then I said to them, because trust me, thanks for your patience, brother. There's a meaning to my madness here. And then I said to them, listen, white boys, because me, I don't care. I'm old black. I say what the hell I want. I guess I'm like Dick Gregory now. I'm unfiltered. I said, listen, listen, white boys.
Yeah.
I'm not into Wall Street, but if you guys are into this is what you do. Start investing in the defense contractors, start investing in gun manufacturers, start investing in companies that make ammunition, because we're headed for both a civil war and a world war. And I kid you not, brother, You got these young white boys who had just graduated from the College of Charleston working on Wall Street, and they were on that yacht writing down notes from what I was saying the same way those white boys were in the classroom in the movie with Rodney Dangerfield.
Wow. Well, you know, I always had a theory. I used to work at a Home Depot years ago, and I used to tell people, I said, if you ever want to know where the stock market is going, as far as, you know, domestically, look at the price of sheetrock, because I always notice that whenever the price of sheetrock goes down,
yes,
the price of sheetrock goes down, the economy, you know, at least what they tell us, is doing well. Whenever it spikes up, then, you know, I always say, hey, you know, gas is going to probably end up going up. And come to find out, I have an uncle who just happens to be a home builder. He said, yeah, because we're the ones that feel it first. If we're not able to put the sheetrock out there. But last question, I'm going to move on. And, you know, thanks for the information.
Hold on, question, Tariq, because we're heading for a break. I'll let you pose the question on the other side. Folks, you too can join us, 800-450-7876. Those are numbers to get you in. We'll take your calls after the short break on
Washington, D.C.'s 1450.
1450 WOL Radio.
Thanks for rolling with us, folks. Our guest is Mark from Anaheim. We're speaking with Tariq in Texas. We'll get back to Tariq in a second. Let me just tell you, coming up the next few days, you're going to hear from our own coach, Butch McAdams, going to tell us what's going on with the NFL playoffs, if there's a chance that a black quarterback will be in the Super Bowl. Also, if the Rooney Rule is working for the, you know, it's got some coaching vacancies, and the carousel keeps going around, but no brothers have been hired yet, so Coach is going to fill us in on that. Sister Ava Muhammad, Dr. Ava Muhammad, she's the legal representative for the Nation of Islam and also for Minister Farrakhan. She's always talking about separation. She'll be here. And Neely Fuller Jr., Dr. Francis Welsing's mentor, he's going to join us as well. Black politics expert, Dr. James Taylor, a political scientist from West Coast, and also Brother Keaty is going to be here as well. So if you're in the DMV, tell all your friends to keep their radios locked on 1450 WOL, where information is power. So Tariq, your second question for Mark.
My second question was, I was watching the news, and I kind of just look at things as, you know, I try to figure out what they're not telling us, Mark, if you understand what I'm saying. And so I saw, I think it was on BBC, how the parliament in Iran, they had everybody just seemed to be behind coming together and possibly, I don't know, going at war if need be with the United States with this whole issue. Is that a lot of fluff? Do you think is the country going to totally be behind it? What's the possibility?
Well, hold on, brother. Are you saying is Iraq now going to unite together behind going after the U.S.? Is that what you're asking?
Well, that as well as how persuaded are the people of Iran to get behind, I guess you could say, their side of the coin, that if something does happen, will they be totally together? Because to me, it seemed like Iraq, when we first went to Iraq, it was this quote-unquote war on terror. It wasn't like we was going after the country per se.
Right, it was the global war on terrorism.
Terrorism, exactly.
Because the Europeans are crazy. They're insane. They declare war on anything. Remember, we had a war on poverty. How did that work for us here in the U.S.?
Not well.
And now we have a war on crime, right?
Yeah, and it's still not working.
Now, mind you, folks, if you pay attention to what I'm telling you, that means they've declared a war on its own people, because these are domestic policies and they call it a war. So now we have the global war on terrorism. And then we can do what's called a preemptive strike. Are you familiar with that term, sir? Wasn't that a preemptive strike they allegedly did last week?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Because that's like the Minority Report. For you guys don't know what Minority Report is, that's a movie with Tom Cruise where before you commit the crime, they already know you're likely to commit the crime, so they take you out before you ever get a chance to commit the crime.
Exactly.
Okay, based on whose intelligence?
But will this be logic? Will this be something that the people of Iran, in which we'll have to declare war on the country itself instead of saying we're going to go after an ideal? Because war on terrorism to me is an ideal. War, it'd be the same as, Congress declared war on Japan during World War II. Will this be the same situation?
You, brother, when's the last time the United States declared war on anybody?
I believe it was World War II.
And have we not been in a lot of wars since then?
We call Vietnam a war, but we did not declare war against Vietnam. Same thing in Korea. We did not declare war against
Don't
Korea.
forget the Gulf War.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. These were wars against ideals, but it wasn't
what I'm saying is, but
this country.
So what makes you think we have to declare war this time?
Well, I'm not saying we have to declare war, but my concern is...
I'm not giving you a hard time. What I'm just saying is, are people not saying right now that Trump broke the law when what he did last week?
They are. Yes. Yeah. I've seen that.
But he hasn't broken the law. Now, folks, listen to me. I'm not agreeing with it, but you folks don't even realize what Trump did is 100% legal, and the laws that got passed by John Birch Society members in this country during the Reagan and Bush years. And by the way, Clinton and Obama didn't do anything to stop them either. Those laws got passed, and what Trump did was 100% legal. In fact, it was one of Obama's national security personnel who even came out and said what Trump did was 100% legal. Because much of the stuff that Trump is doing, guess what president got it passed? Barack Hussein Obama, who killed more people on the continent of Africa than any other president while I've been on this planet, because only a Negro could have gotten away with it. But see, don't say nothing bad about the brother, okay? So what I'm trying to tell you is, sadly, this is what I see. I don't want to sit there like a crystal ball thing, but what I see, because this is what we call blowback, I see the potential for many people who before nobody listened to, many of them on the fringe who would go out and have no problem blowing up their entire family to make a political statement. I see many of those people now being able to coalesce as a faction, siding with others who would have never had anything to do with them, and unite them together now. I see instead, remember now, I told you there was a good chance that this general was going to bring Saudi Arabia and Iran together. Instead, now what you're going to see is Iraq and Iran together, and many factions like Hezbollah and other factions around the world that most people don't even know about, because we got Muslims in places like Philippines. They're all going to come together now. So it may not be the Iraqi people per se who's going to unite. My concern is legitimate terrorist groups that before were not given any attention or any respect by the mainstream Muslims will now get a pass to retaliate against the U.S. That's my concern.
Okay, that answers my question. I was concerned about how involved the Iranian people be involved in this, and that kind of answers my question. And lastly, and I'm gonna get off. What about conscription? Do you think they're going to bring that back soon? And I'm off the air. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your time.
Tariq, hang on a second, Tariq.
Yes.
Because the call wants you to go over that sheetrock model that you talked about real quick.
Yeah, back in the early late 90s, I used to work at a Home Depot in my hometown. I'm not going to say where it is, but it was my hometown. And what I used to notice was that the economy a lot of times would fluctuate with the cost of sheetrock. And because pretty much in any building or home that you have to construct, you have to have sheetrock. You got to have walls. So the builders will get a large shipments of sheetrock in. And typically when the cost of sheetrock was, $1.50, $2, $2.50 or whatever, at that time, I understand this was the late 90s, the economy was doing fairly well. But right around the time, I say 1999 going into 2000, when Clinton was on his way out and Bush was getting ready to come in, it spiked. And we had a kind of a slowdown in the economy, and it spiked up at, once again, understand, this was the late 90s. It got to like $6, $7, $8 a sheet for sheetrock. And I've always, at that time when I was doing that, I always noticed that the economy would kind of ebb and flow with the cost of sheetrock. And I don't know, because I haven't done that type of work in over 20 years. Periodically, when I go to Home Depot or Lowe's, I always walk by and look at the cost of sheetrock. Because if it's pretty good, then I understand that the economy is going to kind of do pretty well if the cost is low.
That's an indicator. The house building is an indicator. But thank you, Tariq. I'll let Mark respond to your question about the draft. Mark?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nelson. I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate what you do, Mark, and I'll talk to you on Facebook.
All right, so one of the things I will say about the sheetrock, unfortunately, that's not a good indicator anymore. You want to know why, Mr. Nelson?
Why?
Because you have foreign investors now who have to find some way to launder their drug money, their corrupt money, their stolen from bank monies. And you have banks in Nevada who have no problem letting foreign investors put their money in their accounts without asking them how they got that money. And so a lot of these foreign investors, what they're doing is they're building houses that are empty. They're buying up property and building homes that nobody's living in. See what I'm saying? So you might have an increase in the activity of purchasing sheetrock, but it doesn't indicate that the economy is better. So unfortunately, that used to be a good barometer back in the early days, but now since the deregulation of the banks that began with the Reagan administration, that's not a good indicator. As far as conscription goes, we don't need conscription. The economy is so bad, they don't need to draft people. We're being starved into submission.
All right, we're racing the clock. Let's go take some more calls for you. 800-450-7876. James is in D.C. And James, thank you for being patient. You're on line 4. Your question for Mark.
How's it going, Carl?
Good.
Okay, well, comment and question. What we're looking at right now is what I've always called design chaos. And when you look at wars and rumors of war, you always follow the money. And that's one thing that nobody ever really talks about, be it about Biden or whomever. And recently, it was this week or last week, I believe, the name of Kissinger came up in the Pentagon Papers, and the first thing I began to think about what's going on now was useless eaters. And that was a proposition paper that he worked on. And if you look at how things are situated, the one thing the United States has not had in a long time is a Baba Yaga. And Mark, you know what that is, right?
I do not, sir.
Baba Yaga is a boogeyman, for lack of a better word.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and if you look at John Wick, it was all based on the boogeyman, somebody, a threat, and at one time the threat was Russia. Right. And Russia started to bank with the U.S., so they no longer became threats to each other, they became partners.
Right.
And I found, in listening to what you were saying, I found something very interesting because, not to give movies too much credence, although there's some truth in it, if you look at John Wick 3, they talked about the high table. and I looked at the high table like the Birth Society and all those other organizations, and then it talked about one who sits above the table. And they were from Saudi Arabia. And it just began, when I listened to that, when I looked at that...
James, do us a favor and move it on because we're racing the clock.
Well, my question is, what trail do you see happening now? Because if you were a prophet, you're on point. Where do you see this all ending?
Well, I'll be succinct on what I see ending. Now, before I give my answer, let me just remind the listeners, for those who want to get in touch with me until Facebook puts me back in jail again, they can reach me at Mark from Anaheim, Political Sarcasm 101 on Facebook. Once again, Mark from Anaheim, Political Sarcasm 101. I was running a fan page and got rid of the group site, but that didn't work because so many people kept joining the group site, so I do monitor both, and I do try to answer your questions. However, folks like Justin, who I know is listening, I'm not going to sit there and answer 20 questions put into one question. Sorry, it ain't going to happen. I have a life. I'm not. If Carl Nelson hadn't talked me into coming on, I wouldn't even come on this show today, but I feel that people need to hear this. So anyway, to answer the brother's question, where do I see this headed? Where these folks wanted to head. You have people like Pence, who's an evangelical, who's a nut. He's insane. These folks truly believe that they need to have an all-out caliphate war against the Muslim world. You said boogeyman. Communism was the boogeyman back in the Cold War. Muslim Islam has become the boogeyman since the Cold War ended. And these folks want to have an all-out caliphate where they destroy the planet because they truly believe they're going to heaven. Now, you have the evangelicals and the Pentecostals here in the United States who do not represent, by the way, and John Birch Society members too, the far-right ring fringe of the Catholic Church. They do not represent mainstream Protestants or even Catholics in this country. Meanwhile, in Saudi Arabia and other countries, you have the far-right wing Wahhabis and a few far-right wing from Iran and Saudi Arabia. They want an all-out caliphate, believing the same thing for their religions. So where is this headed? Jerusalem now is going to be the embassy for the United States, and we're going to have an all-out caliphate, blow the planet up. That's where we're headed.
Okay, last
That's
question.
where we got to leave it.
We have no time
James,
for
we got to run. We're flat out of time. Folks, we got to go. You can get to Mark on Facebook. Stay strong, stay positive. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock right here on 1450 WOL, where information is power.
Thank you all for watching. Please join me on Patreon, where you'll find exclusive material. You can join for just as little as $1 or just as much as 1,000. The choice is yours. Peace and power.